All right, I think we're going to get started. First of all, again, thank you to all the attendees joining us today. Really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. Would like to start by thanking Christy, Jack, and Joe for joining us today to lend their wisdom and for providing their insights and experience to inform our recent report. Would also like to thank Erin Crisp and her team at Tennessee's Grow Your Own Center, as well as Risha Adamson and her team at Missouri State University's Pathway for Paraprofessionals for also sharing their experience and insights and wisdom in the report that is the basis of this webinar. And last, I want to make sure I thank my co-authors, Michela Gaziano and Alex Smith, as well as the Bellwether Communications team for really making this all happen. Our general run of show is I'm going to share an obligatory set of introductory PowerPoints and then really spend the bulk of the time turning it over to our panelists to talk about their work individually, then discuss a set of questions, and then make sure we spend time opening up to the audience to answer your questions. So with that, I'm going to jump in. So one of the ways we came at this is really sort of a recognition there's an emerging set of talent challenges that are really driving a need for new teacher preparation pathways. And to go over some of the high level numbers, there's an estimated 3.2 million K-12 teachers in public education. Out of that number, there's 55,000 slots that are completely vacant right now, and that's a 51% increase from 2022 to 2023. There's also 286,000 people in formal teaching roles in a classroom who are emergency certified. 79% of public schools had difficulty filling roles in 2023-24. 70% of them reported too few candidates. 66 reported a lack of qualified candidates for those who did apply. And this is hitting disproportionately schools with high Black and Latinx representation. So 30%, 34% of schools with high Black and Latino students have vacancy rates of 5% or higher compared to 16% of schools with low Black and Latino representation. There's about 1.4 million paraprofessionals, an estimated 75% of whom don't have a bachelor's degree, which precludes them from teaching. And we know that the number of people pursuing conventional teacher pathways has started to decline over the last decade and a half, going down about 25%. If you want the citations for all these numbers, these are in the report. But this was sort of the basis for, I think, Reach and others going, there's a new innovation we need to think about to address this need. So starting at the high level, just talking about what is an apprenticeship degree before we get into a teacher apprenticeship degree. There's a lot of debate and polarization out there right now between pursuing conventional degree pathways versus work-based learning. So on one end of the continuum, people are saying, let's go and encourage kids to go to the most competitive school, irrespective of debt, because on average, it pays off. And of course, the challenge with that is average is frequently the enemy of equity. And when you parse out the outcomes, there's huge disparities. Then you have the other extreme, which is let's not think about college at all. Let's pursue workforce pathways. And there are a proliferating number of workforce pathways, which is encouraging. And we don't know the value of many of them. And that lends itself to the risk of the historic tracking we've seen in so many systemically marginalized communities. But in contrast, what I think is fascinating about the apprenticeship degree is it offers a hybrid option. It really, as we sort of put in the title, is the best of both worlds, blurring the long-standing lines between higher ed and industry and work. So with an apprenticeship degree, learners can earn a salary working in their intended profession while making progress towards bachelor degrees and other necessary industry credentials that you need to have in order to succeed in that profession at little or no cost, and also gaining critical on-the-job training to help them succeed in the long run. But if that's sort of the high-level summary, here's a little more of the double click into what goes into the design of apprenticeship degrees, and specifically teacher apprenticeship degrees. And I do want to acknowledge that there are lots of different ways to frame this and articulate it. This has been sort of our sort of summary and synthesis of the various sources, but there are other ways to frame it, all of which I think are completely legitimate. But we would sort of say apprenticeship degrees have sort of 7 key elements. The first is work-based and career-connected learning via on-the-job training. So training aligned to the industry set of skills or standards or competencies, whatever it's called, both durable and technical skills that are required for a profession, in this case, teaching, a mentor who's an experienced professional, and time in the classroom for related technical instruction. And so when we think about how this has been played out for the teacher apprenticeship degree programs that we learned from, apprentices are employed as paraprofessionals. or other student-facing roles. There are a range of different roles, but they're all school-based and engaging with students. The mentorship is from an experienced teacher, so someone who's been successful and enduring in the role. Learning in classroom and through school-based skill building to be a teacher, and we'll provide a little more of that in a follow-up page. But there are a set of, again, standards, credentials, skills, however they're framed, that various states have laid out to be a successful teacher in their state. And the apprenticeship experience is not just I'm in the classroom, it's additional formal training that is happening to build the skills and capabilities to succeed. And then usually there's a 1 year co-teaching role in the last year of the apprenticeship where the person is no longer a paraprofessional, but now really serving in a teacher residency role or a teacher role with the teacher of record in the classroom. Second major design element is coaching of apprentices outside of work. And particularly, this is not just sort of general coaching, but academic and life coaching from what we observed with teacher apprenticeship degrees, part of which is critical to help people who are working adults navigate all the challenges to advance successfully, including navigating all the nuances of an institution of higher education, which may be a type of institution they haven't had a lot of experience or success in navigating. Third is rigorous, accessible, and flexible academic content. And this is where for all the learning that happens in number one on the workplace, there's also a education degree-driven component that allows people to pursue a bachelor degree and any other necessary credential. And so this is where, as our panelists will talk about, there are a range of institutions of higher education that can serve as partners. A number of different teacher apprenticeship degree programs actually have multiple IHEs as providers in order to meet the various needs of apprenticeships or apprentices rather. Four is earning while learning to reduce barriers to participation. And again, when we think about the 1.4 million paraprofessionals and the 42 million, and some numbers are even higher, of people who have some college credit but no degree, who need the ability to have income while pursuing education advancement. Related, fifth is affordability at little or no cost to the apprentice. And this is a really critical barrier for that 1.4 million paraprofessionals or 42 million people with some college and no degree. When you look in contrast to people in conventional teacher pathways, there are a range of different figures around level of debt and cost. But I think what we found is one of the most compelling data points is that 45% of teachers have debt, and then average debt is almost $56,000. And by the way, that debt is not evenly distributed based on a race and gender. Six, placement and fit. And I think this is one of the interesting nuances of apprenticeship degrees and teacher apprenticeship degrees in that someone is working for 1 and up to 4 or 5 years in a classroom role. They're getting a chance to really understand, is this what I want to do? What's the culture of the school that I'm going to be teaching in? What are the pedagogy? How do I build relationships and social capital? While both apprentices and districts as employers can try different people on and see who is a right fit for the role, which is in contrast to if a district hires someone as a teacher, they're now the teacher of record and you sort of have them in the classroom. This gives both sides an opportunity to really explore fit. And then seventh is a portable bachelor's degree and additional certificates as needed in the case of teaching, a teaching certificate. And particularly around the bachelor's degree in teaching, it's important because I think other types of apprenticeships that don't have a degree component can confer a certificate or credential, which is very valuable, but it tends to be bespoke and specific to that industry or occupation. Whereas having a bachelor's degree, even an education bachelor's degree, is something that allows for advancement out of teaching and into administration and allows for advancement beyond teaching because a bachelor's degree is a bachelor's degree. And then one thing we will probably come back to in the course of the webinar is, while apprenticeship degrees confer credentials, a significant underlying value is their focus on developing specific skills, again, durable or technical, to really succeed at a profession. And this is, again, something where now looking in contrast at regular degree programs that are very classroom-based, there's not always the ability to develop and really demonstrate empirically through practice the skills that tell an individual, I'm ready to succeed. And a district, in this case, is employer saying, I know you're likely to work out really well. Couple things that are sort of interesting now, more sort of nuanced within teacher apprenticeship degrees, is that many of them are designed to be highly flexible, meeting people where they are and getting them where they want to go. And so this is a bit of an eye chart. It is in the full report, but it's an example from Brazosport ISD's apprenticeship program where they have 4 different on-ramps that are really geared around how much education people have. So some people may be coming in an on-ramp 1 where they have, less than a year or no prior college credit. Bachelor, so on-ramp 2 is more around the 30 to 60 degree, maybe an associate's. And there are people who even come in on ramp 4 that may actually be close to a bachelor's degree or even have it, but want that experience of being in an apprenticeship program. Interestingly, one of the teacher apprenticeship degree programs we profiled, 40% of their most recent applicants for the teacher apprenticeship degree pathway are actually teachers who have emergency certification and know that if they really want to be good teachers of record, they need to go back and get the training. I think the other common thing we've heard is a lot of people are coming in at on ramp 2, where they have, an associate's or something short of an associate's. And again, what this is meant to do is make sure that people who have had prior learning experiences have that recognition as a starting point to accelerate with still having quality experiences as a paraprofessional in the classroom, engaging and learning from the district around a set of micro credentials that they believe are essential to successful teaching. Building on that, one of the things that we thought was really interesting, looking at 5 programs deeply and others, is that this is a young sector. And there are absolutely a lot of innovations happening. There are teacher apprenticeship degrees that partner with multiple colleges to create maximum flexibility from in-person to virtual, classroom-based to competency-based. Teacher apprenticeship degree programs are leveraging a lot of innovative ways to complete a bachelor's degree while retaining a quality bar. That could be on-the-job training and learning, or credits for prior learning, or competency-based pathways. An example of this is from Missouri State University, where apprentices can take assessments to see if their on-the-job training allows them to achieve college credit, but it's the same assessment that their college students take. So it's the same bar for rigor. It's just based on the experience versus classroom time. Some TADs focus on current paraprofessionals, while others recruit people from outside of education, but with the requirement they have to become employees of the school. Some focus on a broad range of teaching roles. Other focus on a specific role. There's a lot of energy around special education as an area of particular need. And some teacher apprenticeship degree programs even focus on individual classrooms. And so there's one anecdote someone shared with us where a teacher was retiring in a couple of years. So they placed an apprentice in her classroom to learn from her to eventually succeed her in that same classroom. I thought that was pretty cool. Some programs also offer a master's degree as a teacher apprenticeship degree. And different types of organizations can play one or multiple roles in creating an effective teacher apprenticeship degree marketplace. And I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. So I think one of the things that was a big aha for us was that it's really important to think about teacher apprenticeship degrees and probably apprenticeships in general as really about creating a high functioning marketplace. And so when we think about teacher apprenticeship degrees, we're talking about how employers, in this case schools, institutions of higher education, and individuals all can work within a market that meets their needs. And I think this is where we've seen some interesting tension in this space in the workforce in general, which is, of course, we want to focus on helping individuals advance. But if they're advancing through a workforce opportunity, there has to be work for them. And I think when employers are sort of treated as sort of secondary stakeholders, that becomes a challenge because there needs to be value created for them. I think one of our big ahas is that altruism doesn't scale. And so I think this is important to think about. And I thought we were really excited to see how this plays out with the providers we profiled. Then around that marketplace are intermediaries and sponsors. Intermediaries are really organizations that sort of make the market work. They establish, coordinate, and provide critical supports to each of the stakeholders. It could be in helping to do the matching for an individual between the right IHE as their education pathway, helping provide critical coaching support directly to the individuals, providing funding. A sponsor is really a role specific to registered apprenticeships, which I suspect we're going to come back to in the discussion. And then, of course, there are systems. And what are the different systems at a local, state, and federal level that really need to be engaged with because they have policy and funding that really dictates how an apprenticeship degree program marketplace can operate. Now, to go very quickly, sort of just deeper on the market principle, one of the things that we thought was really interesting was going through both for employers, individuals, and IHEs, what are the market forces that would make a teacher apprenticeship degree attractive? And I'm not going to read all the words on the page, it's in the essay, but employers are facing unmet labor market demand. So this is not just this is interesting to see we have a shortfall that's not being met. The quality of teacher talent materially affects outcomes. So it can't just be anyone. Talent quality matters to reaching teaching outcomes. And there are specific requirements. It can't just be anyone to get off the street. You have to have a bachelor's degree. You have to have a teacher certification. And then on the individual side, we know there's growing skepticism about conventional pathways, growing reluctance to pursue the cost, but also significant growing interest and enthusiasm for apprenticeships and non-conventional pathways. And then on the IHE side, undergraduate enrollment's way down, including in bachelor and master programs for teaching. Many institutions are facing financial challenges, not everyone, but a number. And yet, cutting across individuals and colleges, there's a large potential market to tap for this. And then last is we started at the end of the report to really identify some next steps to enable teacher apprenticeship degrees to scale and succeed. So one is establishing a common language. It's not an absolute requirement, but it's hard for people to communicate and coordinate and advocate when people are talking past each other. And so we think that's an important thing for people to continue to think about norming on. Second is measurement. And again, a lot of teacher apprenticeship degree programs are in their early days and are building out their measurement capacity, but really being able to use measurement to manage, maximize, and demonstrate value, including to all the stakeholders, is going to be pretty critical to see these things scale. Perhaps not surprisingly, increasing funding, but also reducing barriers to accessing it. And some of this has to do with the vagaries of applying to be a registered apprenticeship and the pros and cons, and then creating infrastructure as well as intermediaries. And this is where, as we've been sort of exploring this idea of markets and systems, we think there's sort of this interim area called infrastructure where what are the things that can be developed that serve the interests of everyone in the market? So not just one organization, competing for growth. And that could be, again, things like measurement, common language, communities of practice. And where this starts to get exciting for us long term is that, a lot of people still have a mindset of plan A is 4-year college and plan B is a 2-year college. And something like this is pejoratively named plan C. But one of the providers, Brazosport, shared with us an anecdote. They had 5 high school students graduate last year and go right into an apprenticeship degree program. And so these 5 individuals, if they succeed, are going to get a college degree and teacher certification at little or no cost. They are going to be getting critical experience to help them succeed in that role once they arrive. They are building relationships. They are paying and building seniority in both the Texas retirement system and in pay levels. And so there is a scenario where if these things can really demonstrate value and scale, it's going to be a great pathway for people who can't pursue conventional degrees, but it could also be a pretty interesting pathway for people who could, but really see this as a not alternative, but a rival to conventional pathways. So with that as sort of a very quick and caffeinated intro, what I'd love to do is turn it to our panelists. And I'd love to start by asking Chrissy to begin by sharing about her experiences from a district standpoint as an employer looking to build these.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thanks everybody for joining us today. It was great to participate in this study and be able to feature Brazosport ISD. As Alex said, my name is Christy Kirshner. I'm currently the founder of Gateway Education Partners. My career actually started in HR leadership, serving in various HR roles, supporting manufacturing and oil and gas. And then about 10 years ago, I transitioned to the education sector, leading HR operations and various strategies, and understanding the nature of our workforce development needs, spending significant amounts of time in talent development. While serving as the Chief HR Officer at Brazosport ISD, I was a part of working with my team to create the first employer-led teacher apprenticeship program in the state of Texas. And so, like all things in Texas, we did this big, and we started with 63 apprentices in our first year of implementation. I share all of this just thinking about the importance of being an employer sponsor and being positioned that way to highlight, like, what are those needs that you have as an employer? What are those pieces related to developing talent to meet the certification needs, the training and development needs, and all of the pieces to make a teacher really successful in your school district, but then also to build their skills and tool sets so they can be most effective in the classroom and build teacher retention and not feel so overwhelmed. We knew that in the forefront of all of our decisions as we were thinking about development, how could we support a multi-year program? The thought about, Alex mentioned the on-ramps of the program from Brazosport ISD. And one of those pieces was sometimes in HR, we're sometimes using the word no a little too often. But how could we create a situation where if there is somebody who approached that district or us as employers who wanted to be a certified teacher who had those career aspirations, how could we say yes? How could we say yes, but then also think about all of the challenges that could potentially be in our way in a multi-year apprenticeship program, and always thinking about sustainability so we could effectively build out that talent pipeline. So we knew we had to be resourceful. How could we reduce? How could we reallocate? How could we reinvest funds to support the overall development of a registered apprenticeship program? That journey actually led me to where I am today in founding Gateway Education Partners. So ultimately, realizing the need and the support that our school districts needed, how can we create operations and provide technical assistance to help develop and stand up teacher apprenticeship programs? So not only supporting those school systems, the aspiring educators, our related training instruction providers, what is that ecosystem that needs the support to leverage this newest talent strategy for the education sector? Also serving as a program sponsor. So Brazosport ISD, starting as the program sponsor in the district, soon realized that there were some other challenges in that space, some related to funding, the ability to negotiate with other institutions and partners for college degrees for their apprentices. So as I transitioned through the district, also the sponsorship as well. And so we continue to support Brazosport ISD and their ever-growing program and where it is today, along with other school districts. I think Alex also asked, what are one of the things that you're most proud of? And I think this work just opening up pathways for aspiring educators. This profession is what makes all other professions a reality. So thinking about the engineers, the doctors, scientists, NASA, all of the places that students will go work when they graduate high school. It's so important that we have the best teacher leaders in those classrooms so they can aspire and meet all of their career goals as well. And so when we think about that, developing the talent pipeline, how can we do that and create pathways that remove barriers from equity and access for apprentices who want to be a teacher and want to be that leader for the students? And so creating programming that allows that to open doors that maybe at one point apprentices thought were closed has been one of the most rewarding pieces of this work altogether. So thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Joe.
Well, great. Thank you. And it's really great to be with well over 100 people who care about building the teacher workforce and building the careers of educators. So thanks to everyone for being here. I'll just share a little bit about what REACH does, just to get the Q&A and conversation started. REACH is a nonprofit and accredited, or what used to be called a regionally accredited higher education institution. We are 100% dedicated to bringing higher education into the workplace, or to reduce it to a slogan, we are dedicated to turning jobs into degrees instead of the other way around. And I think that's what you would call an apprenticeship degree. We do offer associate, bachelor's, and master's degrees, mostly bachelor's degrees. All of these degrees are apprenticeship-based. Our campus is the workplace very intentionally. That means the 400 school districts across the country that we partner with. We serve over 2,000 candidates. 80% of them are at the undergraduate level. 100% of them are employed in schools, and they're employed in positions that exist typically already in the workforce, such as paraeducator or English language aide or library aide or lunchroom worker or back office assistant. We even have a couple of bus drivers and janitors and all sorts of roles. And all of these folks are the apprenticeship degree candidates in our various programs. In the framework that Alex laid out, there's players. Yes, we primarily are the university or the educator preparation program player in an apprenticeship program. We also act as an intermediary as well. In many ways, we're our own intermediary. But in some places, we rely on other intermediaries like Christy on this call and her Edwell and Gateway education organizations to really make an apprenticeship work. And that's amazing when you have someone like Christy in the room for that. The key thing to know, I think, is that the apprenticeship degree always starts with an employer first in terms of the setup, and always starts with a job first in terms of the experience. So school district partnerships are really critical. I don't know, Alex, how much you want me to go further. I'm happy to share a little bit more details, but I know there's some plan for some Q&A here, so I'll rest there for the moment.
Great, thank you. And Jack, to bring us home.
Great. Hey, everybody. Thanks again, Alex, for not just this opportunity, but the report as well. It's a great read. So in Michigan, over the last 10 to 15 years, we've had arguably the largest teacher shortage in the country. Over the past decade, we had a 66% decline in enrollment in traditional education schools. We were also outpacing the country in terms of loss of students even after they joined educator preparation programs. So we had some significant gaps to fill in our both short-term and long-term teacher pipelines. And this was apparent, I think, not just to certain district leaders, but almost every district leader in our state, whether they were rural, whether they were suburban, whether they were urban. Of course, there were different flavors of the challenge, but the challenge nonetheless existed. And it seemed like a really good opportunity, both from superintendents and us as an organization, as a nonprofit, to say, what does a really, truly comprehensive solution look like that is statewide look like? And I think, similar, well, lots of other states, districts have great people like Christy on their staff, and they say, we're going to do something about this. And they go and they attack the problem. In Michigan, we have a lot of districts that don't have a lot of capacity, or Christie's knocking around their central offices with great ideas. And so it takes really additional capacity coming from elsewhere to really help them meet their teacher service needs, both in the short term and the long term. And so a couple of years ago, Michigan Educated Workforce Initiative came together with a number of intermediate school districts, which are county-based districts across the state of Michigan, to imagine what would it look like if we all worked together to create a single program, not 12 or 15 or 50 different little grow your own programs, but a true statewide program that was funded by the state and could serve any aspiring teacher to meet the needs of any district in the state. And if we fast forward to now, we're really proud of where we've come since that journey began about 2.5 years ago. We now have over 1,100 teacher candidates across the state of Michigan. Every county has at least one Talent Together participant. We have 18 post-secondary partners who provide the degrees, and we are working toward a more aligned apprenticeship degree for all of our candidates. What we're especially proud of is in a state like Michigan, and this is maybe not unique to our state, but in a state like Michigan where we had such a teacher shortage crisis, the solution that districts had to put in place, and I'm very empathetic to this, was to find somebody who met the minimum qualifications, i.e. a bachelor's degree, and get them into a classroom under some sort of permit while they were getting their teacher certification. And well, that's really hard. That's hard for kids. That's hard for the candidate who has never maybe been in a classroom or led a classroom of their own before, and is kind of thrown in. And no matter what, support districts can provide, it's often not enough to somebody who's finding themselves in leading a classroom for the first time. And so what we're maybe most proud of is the apprenticeship component of the Talent Together experience, this program that we helped create, is a full year of apprenticeship under a mentor teacher's classroom, where their sole job is to learn and demonstrate a growing number of competencies over the course of that year. That's likely to be a classroom in the school they're going to matriculate into teaching for in the next year. And what we found is that what we're hearing back from our candidates who have now, we had 55 apprentices finish last year. What we're hearing back from them is they feel prepared, which you don't often hear from first-year teachers. They feel like they're ready. They feel like they have a ready-made support network to lean on when they're unsure. And they have a broader Talent Together team that is there to support them when they need to make that phone call as well.
Great. Thank you all. A couple questions, and then we're going to get to questions from the attendees. But one of the critical stakeholders are districts as employers. What advice do you have for districts who are looking at their talent pipeline, their talent shortfalls, and going, this teacher apprenticeship degree thing sounds interesting?
Christy, do you want to answer that
Want me
first?
to jump in? I can, absolutely.
Please.
Thank you. So really building the registered apprenticeship program while serving the HR capacity created a unique opportunity and ultimately a paradigm shift in how school leaders could develop talent to meet the specific needs, depending on the certification and or those skills that are necessary to be a highly effective teacher in the schools that might not be part of their, the student's degree or, the new teacher's degree program. In 22-23, Brazosport ISD went from 0 to 60 and developed and launched an apprenticeship program in about 6 months with about 60 apprentices. Well, I don't know if that's the recommended timeline or strategy, or maybe even volume, right? I can say that with passion and purpose, you'll set up the program and be able to do the most good while remaining focused on what is that strategy that's most important to the employers. So what are they ultimately trying to solve? And Joe, you hit on this moments ago, and Jack as well. And through experience, this changed the narrative. We often hear that people aren't choosing education. With the interest in this program at Brazosport ISD lended to about 250 people attending or signing up and attending an information session to over 180 job applications for the apprenticeship program. So people will choose education, but we have to be able to show the pathways. What does that look like? The work at Reach University, showing the pathway, connecting that to the job is so, so important in creating those opportunities. It's important to establish like all the partnerships, right? So how does that funding look like? As an employer, you're going to think about sustainability differently, perhaps, than maybe your university partners or your college partners, because those apprentices are your employees. Those are benefits and supports that you're providing within the program, and that looks different and perhaps has a different cost burden. Workforce development plays a huge role in terms of partnerships with the ability to unlock funding. With the programs that we support on target to unlock reaching $1 million over the past 3 years in WIOA funding for eligible apprentices. So thinking about the people that you're helping, this might not have been an opportunity for them had the program not existed. I say all of those things, like you have to start, right? You have to start, find those strategies, find the ways to support the needs of the school districts, to get the leaders in the classrooms, to support the student learning and student success, and start big, start small, but most importantly, don't lose sight on the support and the importance of partnership.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything Christy said. The thing I would say too is, especially if you're a small district, or you're not sure how to get started, um, uh, it may seem counterintuitive to district leaders who are their competitors to want to partner with other districts over a teacher staffing plan. But in this case, particularly, there was a question that came up around funding. Um, Shared funding is often easier to secure, particularly if you're going after state funding. It is much more compelling for a legislature to hear from a consortium, for instance, of districts who are partnering together, than it is to hear from a single district that is looking for funding. And so I agree. The advice is sort of be clear about what you need. Be clear about what your vision is. See if others share that vision in your region or across your state, which will then help paint a picture potentially for funders down the road.
I mean, this speaks to one of the big challenges in an apprenticeship degree, especially for universities, which I'll just name, which is that apprenticeships are by definition affordable in ways that typical higher education is not. So what we have to attend to is affordability, which is a combination of funding for tuition and building a program that is affordable and high quality. At the same time, it has to live within public dollars ultimately, or employer contributions ultimately. That means a combination of Pell, federal workforce dollars, state and local workforce funding. Sometimes districts and networks are contributing something as well. But for the university, braiding those together is the job. And it's not the job to create kind of the traditionally high tuition levels that we've seen in some places in higher ed. Apprenticeship, workforce boards typically expect funding to be $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year, maybe $7,000 or $8,000 a year. Once you get sort of north of there, you're kind of not looking like an apprenticeship anymore. Apprenticeship has always been about sweat, not debt. And I think that is a big challenge when you're thinking about how to build a program that will meet the evident demand that is coming from districts that want these programs, but they want them to be sustainable. By the way, I'd say there's two other design challenges for a university to get its head around. And I think of them as the ABCs because it's easy for me to remember. It's not because they're easy as the ABCs. So A does stand for affordability. I just hit that. B stands for based in the workplace from day one to the day of graduation. Now, it's not that that's hard. It's that it's a complete shift because your employer is bringing you your students as a university. They're bringing you the students at the front end of a whole program. They're not coming looking for your graduates because they already have them in the workplace. So they're bringing you students at the front end, and there's already a clinical environment set up. You don't have to worry about where's the clinical going to be. They're in a clinical environment. They're in the workplace, but that requires a practice shift for a university. It usually requires thinking about a practice that comes out of other sectors called business development or partnership development. That is the center of an apprenticeship degree for a university, partnering with employers. So that's the B of the ABCs. And the C is what we call credit for work, which could mean credit for learning on the job or credit for competencies shown on the job. That's a challenge for the design of a degree as well, because you have to figure out how are you going to do that in the workplace. So those three things are doable, and there are places doing it. Featured in the report, I believe was Missouri State College of Education. Like they are doing this at great scale in the state of Missouri. There are many universities and colleges doing it. Well, not many, but there are enough to get this movement started and to show the way that it can succeed.
Great. I also love to see that in chat, people are cross-talking to each other. It makes Zoom more like a cocktail party than a webinar. So please keep sharing with each other. I do want to make sure we start getting to some of the questions that people have. A couple sort of themes to start with there. I think there's some questions around what role do school boards play in driving demand, making these successful, and also the role of teacher unions and collective bargaining. I wonder if not everyone has to answer everyone, but any mix of you have a couple of thoughts and advice on those two critical stakeholders.
Yeah, I'm
restate different. Sorry, go ahead, Jack.
Sorry, I'm happy to just sort of quickly drive by both of those. Firstly, on the school board's front, I'll say in the beginning of Talent Together, in fact, still now, we have a $0 advertising budget. And in 2 years, 2 cohorts have received over 4,100 applications. And that is in large part because much better than a billboard is a school principal or superintendent sitting down with a candidate and saying, you should do this, go apply. And so the role of school boards or district leadership and school leadership writ large is to understand the basics of the program, know where to point candidates, and have those critical conversations with a para or a long-term sub who is really good with kids and has a lot of potential, and say, "Hey, you could be making more money and maybe even be happier. We really could use you as a teacher." The second question around unions. So Michigan is a union state, and we've been working closely with the Michigan Education Association really from the beginning. And I think how it's worked for us being a statewide program, of course, our districts have local relationships with local unions. And so we had to sort of make sure very early on that whatever we were creating sort of statewide programmatically didn't run afoul of local union agreements, and really where we had to be the most careful was around the apprentice teacher salary and benefits. We needed to make sure that locally we couldn't set, for instance, a salary rate as a number statewide, because in some cases that would mean our apprentice teachers were making more than first-year teacher salaries in some districts or less than a paraeducator salary in other districts. And so in order to make sure that we had that gradual scale, we set it at a percentage. So we said all apprentice teachers make 80% of a starting teacher salary. And that idea actually came directly from union leadership here in Michigan. So that partnership was really critical. And then secondly, in any large program, there are going to be, moments where challenges pop up, confusion happens, whatever. And so we had regular meetings with union leadership in the state, so that when they were hearing questions, concerns, whatever, we could go to work and try to solve for those issues that popped up on behalf of candidates and districts. And so far, that's worked. And lastly is, we tend to take the stance that everything else can be figured out locally, as it should be, between a superintendent. We're very sort of protective and honoring of a local superintendent's relationship with their local union. And so far, it's been working 2 years in.
Apprenticeship degrees are designed for workers where there's a union. The union should be in the design process with the district, with the employer, with the university at the front end. And in our experience, whether it's a formal registered apprenticeship program, and by that I mean a capital A registered apprenticeship where Department of Labor dollars are involved, or if it's what we call a lowercase a apprenticeship program where it has the elements of apprenticeship, but it's not funded by the Department of Labor. Either way, where there are unions, in our experience, there's tremendous support and collaboration for this pathway because it's worker focused. It enables folks to have developmental jobs as opposed to permanently kind of statically, and sometimes, to be blunt, dead end roles. That is really compelling for the workforce and for the employer. In California and in Louisiana and places like that where we operate, unions like the California School Employees Union, CSEA in California, are critical local and sometimes informal partners, but yet partners and advocates of the program. In other states, there may or may not be unions, and then you still want to engage constituencies and stakeholders who are connectors to the workforce, because those are the folks enrolling in these things. And in terms of the salary negotiation and scheduling, there's many ways to do this. It is possible to build an apprenticeship degree program with the existing budget and the existing salary schedule of a school, which typically does give credit for education attained and for experience. You can do that without negotiating a new job and a new job classification. In some places you will, in some places you don't have to, and that flexibility is important.
Can I add quickly, Alex, just kind of tagging on some of the things that both Joe and Jack shared, the importance of thinking about those decisions that are important to that employer partner in apprenticeship programming, and then tying to the question for school boards. The program at Brazosport ISD is really wholly successful because of the support of the school board itself. So understanding, what is that ROI? What is the targeted goals to support high quality educators entering the classrooms? And how can you keep your stakeholders informed throughout that process? Talent development is not cheap, right? School district budgets are already limited. One of the closest things your school boards are monitoring is the budget of the school. And so while I say thinking about your stakeholders, your school board being one of them, your CFO is number two. Right. I think Rebecca Kelly is on this call. She's the CFO at Brazosport ISD and now a partner of mine at Gateway Education. But walking that line with the CFO and HR and professional development is one of the biggest pieces that you can have supporting a multi-year program and the overall cost. I wouldn't know how to reallocate funding. I wouldn't know how to make those budget adjustments, right? So making sure all of those stakeholders internally understand that part so you can not be creative with funding to where we all get to wear orange, nothing like that. But how can you be innovative in terms of reducing, reallocating, and reinvesting those district dollars that are currently allocated? Because the first thing the board told me was this can't cost us any money. Right? So we don't have any funding to add. And so how do you do that with your partners? Really quickly, I also want to say, think about the philanthropic organization as you're engaging with your boards, especially during design, development, and launch. Brazosport ISD received a grant from the Houston Endowment, which I think was pivotal in terms of their ability to scale the program in year two from 63 to almost 100 apprentices. I think that was 98 apprentices in year two. But how can you do that design, that capacity change? You need additional resources until that can level out and you can operationalize it. So another strategy to couple with those important conversations with the boards.
So there's a question in chat about charter schools so that everybody hears, and Jack and I responded. In every state we operate, I believe, whether it's Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Colorado, California, Texas, we are supporting a combination of charter schools and district schools. By the way, note the states I mentioned as well. Just this is one of the rare topics and rare public policy initiatives where there's broad support across the spectrum. And so states that are associated as being red or blue or purple, all of them have apprenticeship degree programs arising in different ways and different forms with both charters and with districts. The other question I see here around the Pell Grant and FAFSA, the short answer is that there's not a necessary challenge allocating so-called traditional Department of Education funding to the mix in an effort to braid funding sources to fund an apprenticeship program for teachers. It is actually quite common to draw Pell Grant and to draw other FAFSA or Title IV sources of funding, but to combine those with apprenticeship dollars, workforce dollars, registered apprenticeship program dollars, in a way that achieves affordability and sometimes no tuition for a candidate participating in one of these programs. And that element is actually something that's changing, I think, the composition of the talent pool, because affordability is a huge barrier for folks going into the teaching profession, especially the traditional model where you have to take an unpaid clinical experience, step out of the workforce sometimes to get your credential. One of the real value propositions here is that you can keep your job, stay in your community, stay paid, and do all the things you need to do to become a teacher, whatever the requirements are in your given state.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'll say the vast majority of the 1,100 Talent Together participants right now tell us they did not see a pathway to becoming a teacher until this program came along. And one thing we're really proud of is that means that over a third of Talent Together participants identify as candidates of color, 41% in cohort 2. Which in a state where only 10% of our teachers currently identify as people of color, that's a really big gap closing, opportunity for children across the state. I would say too, the part of what it's a little bit of a logistical challenge on the Pell Grant side, on the federal money side, is that it makes it so that programmatically you have to understand funding on a per candidate basis and what they can quote unquote bring to the table in terms of that braided funding. Some people may come to you particularly for programs that are for folks who have maybe tried and stopped out of higher ed a couple of times. Some folks may come to you having exhausted their Pell. And so why we are such a deep believer in securing some sort of state funding commitment for this is so that you can broadly advertise and essentially say to candidates, finances are not a hurdle here. Sure, if you can bring Pell, that's helpful. Sure, if we can get local workforce board funding, that's helpful. But ultimately, what we need is you, and we will figure out a way to make it work for you as a candidate. If you don't have that backstop funding, so to speak, it makes it a little bit trickier to navigate those financial waters per candidate.
I want to be sensitive to time. We've gotten several questions on something that, in full disclosure to the attendees, we actually workshopped a little bit in our prep call. We realize that systems govern how things like teacher apprenticeship degree markets work. And there is a change in administration. Classically, apprenticeships have felt very bipartisan, but we have several questions from people around what are the thoughts of the panelists on where the federal government may go, and tied with that are who are the key policy actors that really enable these models to work, and how each of you are thinking about that.
I'm not going to predict where the federal government's going to go. I'll just say that off the top. I think what I'll say is this is where having a statewide program is beneficial, particularly in a purple state. And even not, even if it's a blue state or a red state, you still have different politics depending on the kind of region you're in, rural, urban, suburban, et cetera. And so we felt some pretty strong bipartisan support for our program. Largely because, I think maybe to oversimplify, Democrats, tend to want to support teachers as teachers, right? That's something that's important to their core politics. Republicans tend to be the workforce people and want to supply workforce. And in a lot of rural communities, the districts are the largest employers. They're certainly one of the most important community organizations in those districts. And so often legislators that are located in rural areas are closely tied to what's going on in their local districts and understand the needs and the challenges and try to step in where they might be helpful. And so in that way, I think we have very much experienced this as a bipartisan issue.
I mean, even yesterday, the designated nominee to lead the Department of Education, the one posting on the LinkedIn page that she has is an apprenticeship posting. There is tremendous support for apprenticeship across the spectrum of political perspective. And I think I think should give us all a lot of optimism, because there's not a lot of topics where there's a lot of consensus. Workforce development and apprenticeship are a place of consensus. Approaches are going to differ from state to state, and that's fine. And already apprenticeship degrees are flourishing in very, very different political environments across the country. And I think that local control is actually a good thing and a strength. And I think it will help this emerging innovation to become more of a systemic thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, partnerships with your workforce board will definitely help enable you to navigate some of how the funding could work and help support apprenticeship programs. With workforce development being primarily bipartisan, the support for all industries, right? This is an opportunity for education to not think about themselves as different than any other sector, right? Creating opportunities to upskill talent, economic mobility, and helping, aspiring educators become a certified teacher, which some are tripling their salary if they're serving as para-educators. Those are the pieces that help meet the workforce board metrics, if you will, related to how they're spending and allocating their Federal Reserve funding for Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. And so knowing who that partnership and knowing who they're supporting and how that funding could enable these career opportunities really goes a long way and will kind of help manage, I think, that political landscape.
And I'd add, if there's not a up and running apprenticeship program for teachers where you are, if you're listening to this, we have put together at Reach University in partnership with everyone on this panel, the National Center for the Apprenticeship Degree. No one provider can be everywhere. So what NCAD, the National Center, is doing is bringing together in a cohort each year other universities and colleges and employers who are delivering apprenticeship degrees, as well as providing technical assistance to new providers. This is an emerging field, and keeping, bringing together the providers who are doing it successfully now is critical to establishing standards of practice and building a knowledge base and identifying policy solutions that create the right incentives and accountability for the field to flourish. So that's a little plug for the National Center for the Apprenticeship Degree. If you're interested, I think the link will be sent to the chat if you'd like to get in touch.
I'll just say as a partner, Joe's right, and NCAD was incredibly helpful to us in getting Talent Together off the ground. We would not have been able to do it without them. So thank you, Joe, and thank you, Eric and team from NCAD.
Well, we are in our final moments. So again, a big thank you to the attendees. The recording of this will be sent out. A huge thank you to Christy, Jack, and Joe. In our final sort of under 120 seconds, any final parting words of wisdom about teacher apprenticeship degrees?
Just remember the ABCs.
Yeah, remember the ABCs. I think, focus on the apprentice to where an individual can see the pathway. Help make it visual.
If you're not going to speak, Alex, I'm going to take a personal privilege to thank Alex and the team at Bellwether for putting together this report. It's a really great landscape report. And also thank Bellwether and Alex as well for the strategic framework. I recommend everyone read the report on strategic impact that looks at how organizations can both provide direct impact and also facilitate widespread and systemic impact, especially when you're trying to bring forth an emerging model. And the apprenticeship degree is an emerging new model. And it's hard to get all the players in place, but there's ways to do it and ways for everyone listening to be involved in both direct work as well as the system work that will be necessary to make this work at scale.
Thank you, Joe. And it has been a pleasure to work with all of you and the other providers on this report. So I hope everyone has a good rest of day.